Hello, I'm James from Borussia Dortmund English, and this is the Echte Liebe podcast. It again rained goals at the Westfalenstadion as we continued our impressive home run with a 5-2 demolition of Borussia Mönchengladbach. It was another one of those games where I had my doubts in the build-up, the same as in the Frankfurt and Wolfsburg matches, but after 15 goals scored in those 3 games, what do we need to worry about? Well, I'll be covering that a little later in the show, but for now, let's just enjoy what Edin and his staff have managed to build in terms of a team and also the fortress in which they play. In our current form, especially on the attacking end, I feel like we can compete with anyone. Since the turn of the year, we've clicked, and the key component to that is quite simply the availability of Sebastian Haller. On his return, we have dominated and outscored every team in Europe's top leagues. It's scary to think where we might have been if we would have had everyone available from the start of the season. Of course, that wasn't possible, and it did take some time before it gelled. But if I'd have said to you 2 years ago that we would have had the most exciting and ruthless attack in Europe, and it didn't include Royce, Sancho, or Haaland, you'd probably not listen to a single one of my podcasts ever again. Edin had a clear idea of the type of striker that he wanted to bring in and lead the line. Someone that on their own was a handful and could finish, but more importantly, somebody who made everyone else around them better as well. He's managed to mould this attack so that no matter who comes into the system, they know exactly what to do and what's expected of them. I guess now his focus must turn to the other end of the pitch. They say that putting the ball into the net is the hardest job in football, and whilst that's true to some extent, surely the second hardest job is stopping that from happening. Both are an art form in their own right, but whereas individual brilliance can score you a goal, unfortunately, that's not always enough for preventing one. Over the last few seasons, and including this one, we've seen on too many occasions that this team will always give you a chance. With our squad depth in the centre-back department, which pretty much just consists of only 3 players, we've witnessed Terzic having to preserve, protect, and at times do the complete opposite and take risks with his team selection and substitutions. It's such a balancing act when you only have Nico, Mats and Niklas to navigate you through an entire season. It leaves you vulnerable, as we saw against Stuttgart when Mats was taken off, and again when he was taken off against Gladbach. On both of those occasions, Edin felt that the game was already won and therefore, and understandably, felt that he could rest Mats. Against Stuttgart, it turned into a disaster, and against Gladbach we came close to another. Conceding 2 quick goals when cruising at 4-0 can happen, but if it wasn't for Kobel, it would have been 3, and who knows after that. Luckily for us, it appears that Nico Schlotterbeck has finally been given the rest he needed to recover from his recurrent injury, and with 2 games to go, I find it doubtful that Terzic will feel the need to rest one of them at any point during those games. I'm sure it's something that Kel and Sammer will look at in the summer. As fans, we are in what feels like uncharted territory. At this stage of the previous 10 seasons, all we've had to look forward to were the potential transfers and rumours that fuel us in the off-season. If we were lucky, we'd keep one of our stars for another year, and that was how we measured our success. But not anymore. It feels different now. Of course, being in the title race is the main difference, but the recruitment under Kel has me excited for next season already. He will know the areas he needs to address, and we've seen ourselves linked with many names over the last few months. I'd argue that he hasn't made a poor signing yet. There are those that haven't been as high impact and as exciting, namely Salih Özcan, but statistically, he has been as solid as any of the others. We don't yet know the extent of the departures ahead of this off-season, but I have full confidence that the plan of having 2 quality players for every position will be seen through. And if Sunday was any type of indicator, we may already have one heck of a left-back coming in this summer. There's only 2 match days left until we finally find out who will be crowned German champions. After our very average first half of the season, I don't think any of us would have dreamt that we'd be taking it down to the wire against a Bayern squad that quite honestly is overpowered in all positions. I remember watching their second leg against PSG in the Champions League, and they started that game with Sane, Gnabry and Mane all on the bench. I just recall thinking to myself, who else in world football can afford those luxuries? Oh, and they went on to win that game 2-0. See, It's easy to overlook what we are competing against, and not only that, but where we came from and the number of points that we've gained in the second half of the season alone. We've had frustrating results against the likes of Schalke and Stuttgart, but with only 180 minutes of football left to play, let's take a look at where the Meisterschale could potentially be won or lost. It's no secret that BVB are a force to be reckoned with at home. In the 16 games at the Westfalenstadion this season, we've won 14 of them, drawing 1, and then the 1 loss to Werder Bremen. I'm sure we all remember the pain of that one. In those 16 games, we've scored 53 goals, which is just remarkable, and that averages out at 3.31 goals per game. Equally as impressive are the 15 goals against, and you don't need me to tell you that that's less than 1 goal per game. Our home form isn't an issue. In fact, it's the only reason why we are currently in the position that we are in. In contrast, and this is the first part at looking at where I think we may lose the title, our away form has been very inconsistent. Of the 16 away games, we have only won 7 of them, drawing 3 and losing 6. We have only scored 25 goals on the road. That's less than half of that on home soil. But even more worrying is the 27 goals against in those games. We've conceded 2 goals more overall than what we've scored. Again, we don't need to be football analysts to know how detrimental that can be in the long run. So why is this relevant? And more importantly, at this stage of the season, you may ask. Well, our next game, as you all know, is away from home against Augsburg. In all honesty, I don't think it matters who our opponents are. It's simply the fact that it's away from home that is really worrying. If we are to take this to the wire, we have to win the next game. I don't see Bayern dropping points against RB Leipzig. Their toughest test, I think, will be away at Köln on the last day of the season. But only if we keep the pressure on them as we have been doing. This is the weekend that we can lose the title. I think it will be the week after that we can win it, and not the other way around. We need to put ourselves in the best possible position, which will be hard when our last away win in any competition was on the 25th of February, nearly 3 months ago. It was Julian Brandt with a goal at Hoffenheim, and if I remember rightly, if it wasn't for Gregor Kobel, we wouldn't have taken all 3 points that day either. That's what we're up against. There's no sugarcoating it. We need to break these bad habits that we've developed, and we need to do it starting Sunday. If we don't, then I'll finally concede to the argument that we don't deserve to be German champions. And after fighting that for the last 5 months, that will be a hard pill to swallow. Now, how do I think this title will be won and when? As I've already said, I think this goes down to the last day of the season. Why wouldn't it? It's the most Dortmund thing that Dortmund could do. I've spoken on how we can lose the title this weekend and our bad away habits, but one good habit we have is getting the job done when we already know that Bayern have done theirs. For 2 consecutive weekends we've gone into games knowing that Bayern had already won their game and moved further ahead. One mistake, one slip up in either of those games and we could pretty much have kissed goodbye to any hopes of ending their decade-long reign. But we responded. We have hammered 11 goals in against 2 very strong sides, one of those that has taken 4 points from the Bavarians this season alone. It's this side of BVB that I expect to outweigh the fact that we are away from home. Time and time again, when we know or think that the job is done, we relax and throw away valuable points. That won't be the case here. We'll know that we can't relax right from the start, and I think that will be the key in taking it to the last game of the season. If it does, I think we beat Mainz on the last day, and comfortably. But Bayern will have to go to our friends over in Köln, and Köln have no pressure. They are safe, they can't qualify for Europe, and the Rhein-Energie-Stadion will be bouncing. In effect, they have a free game that can change and make a huge mark in the history of the Bundesliga, and I think, with the pressure off, they'll hold Bayern to a draw at least. Sometimes I sit and smile to myself, and that's not just because this game and this team have driven me insane, but when I look at the situations and scenarios and try to make some sort of reasoning or prediction from it, most of the time I'm completely off with them. Football really makes sense, and it's even rarer that it follows a script. Anything can happen. Both ourselves and Bayern could quite easily lose this weekend as much as they may also win. But one thing that this game does bring to us all that keeps us following our teams through thick and thin is the magic. I don't know why, but I can't look past the fact that Edin is the one to break the mould. We tried everything from the best up-and-coming coaches in Europe to the old stalwarts like Peter Stöger. But the magic is that a fan and a man that stood side by side with all of us is the one to finally bring the Meisterschale back to the Westfalenstadion. If you have managed to get this far in the show, then I'd like to say a huge thank you. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button, and if you want to support the show, you can become a Borussia Dortmund English member via the Patreon page. And this really does make a huge difference, so again, thank you. I'll put all of the links below, but for now, we have a make or break game to look forward to on Sunday. I'll see you all on the pages over the weekend. Take care everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Echte Liebe podcast.